Well, welcome to another Friday night. Last week I told you we were going to start a new series, and it was really going to be a repeat of an old series and expanding on it. And it's on the characteristics of complex trauma. And 7 years ago we filmed a series and did 60 characteristics of complex trauma. And over the last 7 years, as I continue to work in this field, it's just greater insight and clarity into complex trauma. And so now my list is at 85 characteristics. And this series is an attempt just to bring them together in summary form so that you can get a clear, full picture of what complex trauma does, how it affects us. If you want more detail on some of these characteristics, there's other videos that you can watch. The purpose of this series is not to beat up people with complex trauma. It's not to judge them or look down on them. These are ways of coping, of surviving, that developed for a child who didn't feel safe. They didn't have any other option to survive. They didn't realize how it was going to affect them later in life. That's what they had to do to survive. And so this series is just designed to give you insight into it, because what happens 20, 30 years later is you realize all those survival tools, the patterns of behavior and thinking and emotions that developed, they're not working now. They're messing up my relationships. They're hurting me. They're hurting the people I love. But people go, well, why am I doing this? Where did it come from? This is designed to help you understand that and to know how you can begin to change that. So last week we got through the first 10 characteristics. So let's dive in, and these again are going to kind of be, how does trauma affect us physically? And I want to look first at how it affects our memory. So for many people with complex trauma, they have flashbacks. It's a very disturbing part of that. So they all of a sudden are walking in the day and there's this intrusive memory that just pops into their mind that is just causes them to start shaking, sweating, breathing hard, and creates great anxiety. And so they didn't invite that thought in. It just, these intrusive memories come in. Others have nightmares, dreams that are very scary. Others, they go to certain locations or events, or they meet certain people, and all of a sudden they get these flashbacks. They get triggered by driving down the street, going back to your hometown, whatever. And they can be very scary, and they can send you back into a fight, flight, freeze response in a heartbeat. And so it's just a reality for many people. But then the next one is that most people with complex trauma experience gaps in their memory. There's periods of their life that they just have no memory of. So I've dealt with many clients that don't have any memories before the age of 12. I have others that don't have any memories around particular years when they're 6 and 7 or 8 and 9 or whatever. What's that all about? And so it's really, to me, important to understand there's a lot of pieces here. So it begins with cortisol. So cortisol was actually designed to increase your memory. Cortisol was designed only to be delivered to the brain in short bursts when a person was in danger. And so what would happen with that cortisol is it would get the adrenaline going, give you energy to fight or flight. So you could get out of the danger, you could get back to safety, then the cortisol would stop. But what happened with that is the cortisol would burn into your memory what just happened. And it was its way of saying, be aware of this, you never want this to happen again, this was terrible. And so that's where for many people, they can still remember 9/11/2001, where they were standing when the jets went into the towers in New York. It's because the brain said that is a significant, world-changing, scary event. Don't forget it. So cortisol kind of burns in memories. That's the design. But what happens with complex trauma is that the child is in danger all the time. So cortisol is always pumping. It wasn't designed to do that. And it starts to do damage in the brain. So you have your left lobe and your right lobe of the brain that are joined by this bridge called the corpus callosum, which is just a thick network of nerves and fibers. And so what happens with that is when we go through any event, we create a memory. Part of the memory gets stored in the left lobe, part of the memory gets stored in the right lobe. So in one part of the brain, in one lobe goes the emotions of the memory, in the other part goes the details of the memory. And then anything that triggers the emotions, anything that triggers the details, corpus callosum joins them, and you get back the full memory of details plus emotions. But what happens with cortisol pumping all the time is that it burns the bridge, the corpus callosum. So what then happens for some people is they now don't even have access to the details. They don't have memory of the details. Others, they get all kinds of memory to the details. They just don't have any emotions around the details. So they can tell you, oh, yeah, I was sexually abused. Yeah, I was beaten all the time. And it's like they're reading a phone book. There's just zero emotion. And so you get very detailed emotion with no memories or huge memory gaps. So what happens when a person gets into recovery, they get into safety, so the cortisol isn't pumping anymore, the corpus callosum starts to heal. Now here's what typically starts to happen as the corpus callosum starts to heal. So let's say that you were a person who didn't have any details of memory. You had memory gaps. But now the corpus callosum starts to heal and you start getting wisps of memory. You start getting these weird dreams and you go, don't think that happened to me, but it kind of feels real. And you're not sure what to make of it. What I find for many people at this point is part of them wants the memories to come back. Part of them is afraid for the memories to come back because they're afraid of what they're going to find out happened to them and how painful it was. And so they find themselves in this dilemma. But I get asked all the time about memories. Will they come back? And I say if you're in a healthy environment, safe environment, and that corpus callosum is healing, memories definitely will come back. Now, maybe not all of them will, but definitely some will. All of them might eventually come back, but you might still have gaps years later. But here's what I want you to understand. Do you realize that the memories aren't coming back until the corpus callosum is healing? And the corpus callosum is healing because you're safe. There's no cortisol pumping. It's almost like the brain is made, so it's not going to bring back memories unless you have safety, support, tools. It's almost like it knows, has a sense of the right timing for when to bring the memories back. It won't bring them back until you're able to deal with them, until you're able to process them and resolve stuff internally and heal and grow. So what I want people to realize is don't be afraid of memories. The memories aren't going to come back until you're safe, have support, have tools. The second thing I want people to realize is, because I often get asked, well, then how can I heal and grow if I don't have the memories? And what I say to people is, I don't need to know your specific memories to understand some of your core issues. I don't know what caused you to have deep shame, but I know you have deep shame. I don't know what caused you to have a deep fear of abandonment, but I know you've got a deep fear of abandonment. I don't know what caused you to dissociate so much, but I know you have deep dissociation issues. So I can work on those. And I can help you heal those. I can help you learn new tools and grow in those areas. I don't need the memories to do healing. Now, it might help you down the road to get some of those memories, and they're going to add clarity to some of that and help you be able to go to even deeper levels. But we can start by just working on the issues. Now, there's another piece to this memory. So we talked about the memory gaps. So they're the person that just doesn't remember anything. So that part of the brain has been cut off because of the corpus callosum. But what happens for those people is if they walk into a situation, let's say they go to a certain neighborhood in town, all of a sudden they could be panicking, they're sweating, they're breathing hard, they don't know why. So they're having an emotional flashback without the memories. So that's what happens for many people with complex trauma who have memory gaps, is they don't get memory flashbacks, they get emotional flashbacks. They get that lobe of the brain is being triggered, but they can't connect it to any details. So that is a very real reality for many people from complex trauma, is they have these emotional flashbacks, but they don't have a clue why. As you get to safety, as you get working on yourself and the corpus callosum heals, what begins to happen for many people is the emotional flashbacks, they begin to connect it to memories of certain details, and gradually they can rebuild the memory. The next characteristic that happens to most everybody with complex trauma is burnout. So we have two parts to our nervous system. We have a sympathetic nervous system and a parasympathetic nervous system. And the vagus nerve kind of controls which part of our nervous system we go to. And so if we are safe and connected, there is a balance between our sympathetic and our parasympathetic. So if you see on the right side of this graph, our sympathetic, that's our performance zone. We go to work, we get up, we're active, we have energy, we put out. But then, because we're safe, we're connected, then we can go home and relax. And then we go to our parasympathetic, and there's rest and healing and rejuvenation happens. And that's the healthy life, when the vagus nerve knows that we're safe and connected. But what happens if we're constantly feeling in danger? So we're being hurt, abused, or neglected. Our needs aren't being met. We constantly feel in danger. Then the vagus nerve puts us into constantly 100% in our sympathetic nervous system. As a result of that, we can't rest. We can't get healing. And so we go. So we use adrenaline for energy. We use kind of our sugar fat reserves for energy. We can get ourselves angry to get adrenaline going for energy. People can use medication and drugs to get energy. But eventually they burn out. That's the only way the body can protect themselves from being totally destroyed. It's, I better start shutting down. I better go on strike. I better let this person know I am not going to cooperate anymore. Now, I've always found it very important that we can be in our sympathetic nervous system all the time because of trauma and danger, because our needs aren't being met, neglect, or because of abuse. So that's what we focus on a lot. But many people can be in their sympathetic nervous system most of the time because of bad teaching. So they were raised with parents who, you got to work all the time to be productive, because they came out of poverty. They came out of that kind of Protestant work ethic. And if you relax, you're being lazy. If you relax, you're being selfish. Or they came out of teaching religious or cultural, where love means you never say no to anybody. You just give, sacrifice. So if you ever stop and take care of yourself and do self-care, you're being selfish. You're being lazy. And so that bad teaching can cause people to just constantly feel the need to be in their sympathetic nervous system, and then they burn out. So some of the symptoms of burnout, because many people don't realize that there are early symptoms to being on the way to total burnout, total physical and emotional shutdown. So let me give you some of the physical symptoms that you're on the way to burnout. So just fatigue, persistent tiredness, even after you've had a good night's sleep. difficulty falling asleep because you're in your sympathetic nervous system all the time. Your deep sleep only comes when you're in your parasympathetic nervous system. So you got sleep issues. Then you got headaches and muscle tension because you're constantly on guard, alert, tight. And so you get frequent headaches, muscle aches in your shoulders, neck, back, frequent illnesses. When you're in sympathetic nervous system and not in your parasympathetic, the parasympathetic is where your body heals itself. It's where your body deals with bacteria and viruses and repairs itself. But if you're constantly in your sympathetic nervous system and your parasympathetic is not allowed to work, you're going to get sick more often. Some start going through appetite changes. You just want to eat constantly, or you just lose your appetite altogether. And then there's emotional signs that you're moving toward burnout. So you're just more irritable, more easily frustrated. You just don't have patience with people. You get angry over minor little things. Or you have a lot more anxiety than normal. You're just constantly on edge. Your stomach just has this anxious feeling in it. Or your mood is just a bit down. You got a low mood. You're kind of mild depression stuff. You're just a sadness, a sense of hopelessness and apathy about you. Or you just feel kind of detached, emotionally numb, not that connected to stuff. You have this kind of withdrawing from others pull going on inside of you. Or you just feel very inadequate, that I'm not good enough. I feel like a failure. Or you can just all of a sudden cry at the drop of a hat, or you just feel numb emotionally. So your emotional world is just really out of sorts. Or you can have cognitive changes. So brain fog is starting to settle in because of the increased stress and moving toward burnout. Difficulty concentrating, memory problems, you're now indecisive, or you become very negative in your thinking. You tend to catastrophize or go to worst case scenario or dwell on the negative. Then there's behavioral changes when you're heading towards burnout, where you just start procrastinating. You're just too tired. You don't have the energy to do anything. Just put it off. You avoid tasks, even very simple ones. You just don't feel motivated. You start to withdraw from friends. You start to withdraw from family. You start to withdraw from the activities that you used to enjoy. You start avoiding your work and your responsibilities. You're looking always for a way to not do something. Some go to, I need to work harder. I need to push through this. And now they're working 20 hours a day trying to catch up, trying to get back on track. And you start to neglect self-care. You skip meals. You stop doing the things you normally did to meet your 12 needs, to relax, to take care of yourself, because you just feel busy or too tired to do it. And then there's relationship signs. So increased conflict in relationship. You just argue more often, get annoyed with your partner more often, more anger outbursts, or you just don't want physical intimacy, or you want physical intimacy constantly, or you just avoid dealing with problems in the relationship. Just sweep it under the carpet, hope it goes away because you're just too tired to deal with it. Or you start isolating in relationships, you avoid social settings, you avoid spending time with people, or you have this growing resentment with people that you have relationships with, that you just feel unappreciated by them, overburdened by the demands of relationships, and you just have a growing resentment. So burnout is a huge issue for people coming out of complex trauma. So to expand on that, it's the next characteristic, and it's what happens when you've spent your life with your sympathetic and your parasympathetic having been out of balance, because that's what happens in complex trauma. The problem with that is when you spent your life doing that, your brain begins to feel that that's normal, that that's the way it should be. It becomes your default setting. It's where your brain wants to go to feel normal. This is so important to be aware of. And so for many people coming out of complex trauma, they get into recovery and they get up in the morning and all of a sudden it's like, I better get in my sympathetic nervous system and just stay there constantly. So they'll get a coffee to get stuff going. Some will get themselves angry. Some will get some chaos or drama happening. Anything to get them to that, back into their sympathetic nervous system, and then they don't go to a balanced parasympathetic. So, 2 issues I want you to be aware of when that is your default setting. First of all, when you're in your sympathetic nervous system all the time, you can't connect. We only connect with people and have meaningful relationships when we're in our parasympathetic nervous system, when we feel safe. And so when you have this as your default setting, it is going to make healthy relationships impossible. You are not going to be able to be present and emotionally available to your partner, to your children. Secondly, when you're in your sympathetic nervous system all the time, you can feel the emotion of pleasure, but you can't feel deep joy that comes out of connection and safety. That's only experienced when you're in your parasympathetic nervous system. And so that very thing that leads to satisfaction, that leads to peace, you're not going to have. There's going to be the ongoing pursuit of pleasure, but never the experience of deep contentment. And that's going to cause problems. But there's other issues that come out of this for people in recovery. So if this has been your default setting, your normal, and you come into recovery and you begin to learn, I need to have a balanced sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system. Okay, I'm going to start relaxing at night. I'm going to start doing self-care. I'm going to get into a daily routine where I meet my 12 needs consistently. I'm going to develop habits that I do every day. What that feels like is boring. What that feels like, it's dead. So what happened when this out of balance was your normal? The only way to maintain that was through cortisol and adrenaline. And so your brain actually becomes addicted to cortisol and adrenaline. And when you don't have cortisol and adrenaline happen, because your life is actually healthy, it feels wrong. It feels boring. It feels dead. What made you feel alive was adrenaline. So that leads to the next characteristic that comes out of complex trauma, and that is that many become addicted to chaos and drama. So how do I feel alive? I need cortisol and adrenaline. How do I get that? I need to create chaos. I need to create drama. Because if I'm healthy attached, if I'm safe, if my needs are being met, there's no adrenaline, cortisol. It feels dead. It feels empty. Now here's where, to me, it gets tricky and so important to understand. Do you realize that a child in safety, where their vagus nerve knows that they're connected and safe, and there's the balance between their sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, what happens when the child is safe and connected is the brain releases not cortisol, not adrenaline, it releases serotonin, oxytocin, dopamine, endorphins. 4 feel-good chemicals that result in joy, result in contentment, result in peace. In complex trauma, those 4 chemicals aren't happening. In complex trauma, you're not able to feel joy, peace, so you go to, let's feel pleasure, let's feel a rush, let's feel alive through adrenaline and cortisol. The solution is to go back to healthy connection. But that feels wrong. The brain now says, no, the only way to feel alive and happy is drama and chaos. Now let me just, beyond kind of sympathetic, parasympathetic being out of balance, and that then you need chaos in order to feel alive. There's some other factors that come out of complex trauma that I want to bring in. So one of the things that was necessary for a child who doesn't feel safe, in order to survive physically, they had to shut down parts of their emotional world, parts of their conscience, parts of their soul. So we call it soul murder. So they had to shut down any emotions that made them vulnerable to being hurt. So I can't cry, I can't be sad, I can't show empathy or kindness, because then I'll get picked on, then I'll get made fun of, then I'll get punished, I'll get shamed. So let's shut down emotions. I can't even have a conscience, because if I have a conscience, then that makes me vulnerable to being punished as well and picked on. So let's shut down my conscience. I have to shut down my gut, because I get made fun of, or I get told I'm stupid, or I'm seeing everything wrong if I listen to my gut. So they start shutting down key parts of themselves in order to survive. What happens when you start shutting down your emotions, your gut, your conscience? You feel dead inside. What makes you feel alive? Let's have drama. Let's have chaos. Let's get the adrenaline going and the cortisol going. Then we feel alive. We don't know how to make our conscience, we don't know how to make our emotions alive again. We feel that's too dangerous, because then we might get hurt again. So let's rely on cortisol and adrenaline to feel alive. There's another piece that comes out of complex trauma that feeds into this addiction and chaos, and that is, for some kids, they weren't validated for being a good kid. They weren't noticed if they were obeying and doing what their parents wanted and getting good marks in school and being kind. The only time they got their parents' attention and therefore validation is when they were bad, when they were causing problems. And so in their mind, it's better to have validation for the wrong things if you can't get it for doing the right things. Validation for the wrong things is better than no validation at all. So if I can get my dad angry at me, at least he'll connect with me, at least I'm getting validation. It's better than not getting any attention from dad at all. And so there's that need to create drama, to create chaos, because it got attention. Connected to that is the only time their parents actually focused totally on them, connected emotionally with them, is when their parents were angry at them for something wrong. Or the only time they had an intimate connection with their parents is when there was drama in other people's lives and we all gossiped about it and whispered and talked about, oh, isn't that awful? And it was like there was an excitement in this connection that was happening, but it was all because of the drama I created or the drama that others created. And then there's another purpose for drama in a complex trauma family. So if everything is going along smoothly, what happens is nobody knows how to connect. And so relationships start to drift apart. They start to kind of go downhill. So how do you get to an intense feeling of connection in a relationship again? You got to make something bad happen. You got to create chaos. You got to create drama. Then there's a huge fight, but everybody connects. And then there's make-up sex, and it's this intimate sense of the relationship is great again. Everything's good again. But then everything starts drifting downhill as things smooth out. So the only tool that the child learns to create intense feelings of connection in a relationship is create drama, create catastrophe, create a crisis. And then that will lead to intense sex and intense feelings of connection. So people come into adult life and they run into any of those situations. They don't feel seen. They feel the relationship is drifting apart. They're not feeling connected. Create drama. The next characteristic of complex trauma that is so important to understand is complex trauma results in the limbic brain being in control. And the limbic brain, when it's in control in a dangerous environment, begins over time to pull me in a negative, harmful direction. So let me explain all of that, because this is such a huge issue. So you got your main parts of your brain. Your brain stem, which controls your organs and all your involuntary functions. Then the child brain, the emotional center of the brain. The survival part of the brain is the limbic brain. It's where you feel emotions. So when you're in danger, fear, and that kicks in, fight, flight. That's all your limbic brain, and that's the brain that the child has. And then the mature part of the brain, the cortex, that's the thinking part of the brain that's able to process what is healthy, think in terms of long term, whereas the limbic brain only thinks in terms of immediate results. How do I get instant gratification, instant safety? It isn't concerned about long-term consequences. It's just concerned about now. So a child gradually in a healthy home moves from their limbic brain, because that's all they have, to use more and more of their cortex until they get to mature adult life, where they still listen to their limbic brain, but their cortex is their executive. It manages things. It thinks things through. It receives information from the emotions and the limbic brain, processes them, decides what to listen to, decides what's the best course of action in light of what's healthy and light of what's long term. But in complex trauma, you're in danger all the time. And so you're in your limbic brain all the time. So a child who's in complex trauma for years and years and years, they're not growing into their cortex. They're staying in a limbic brain that is firing all the time, that is the boss, that is in the driver's seat. The cortex, yeah, they're learning to think a little bit, but it isn't the executive. So they don't think long term. They still think now. Instant safety, instant gratification. So let me expand on this just a little bit more. A child in a healthy home where they're safe and connected, their limbic brain, it is a very wonderful, positive influence in their life. It really does two things for them. Number one, it adds to the beauty and fullness of life. So when you listen to music, watch a sunset, see the mountains, you're filled with these warm emotions. When you get a hug from somebody, when you connect with somebody, warm emotions that just fill out and make life even more meaningful. The limbic brain is also a protective part of the brain, so that if you're in situations all of a sudden, you're normally in a healthy, safe environment, but you go into a dangerous environment, you feel fear. And then that creates the instinct to fight or flight. You need to get out of here. You need to get to safety. It is designed to protect you. It pulls you towards healthy steps to protect yourself. You need to talk this through. You need to stand up for yourself here. You need to express your needs in this situation. You need to be really vulnerable here. It pulls you in a healthy direction. But in complex trauma, a child will initially, when they're in danger, they will try to be vulnerable. They will try to stand up for themselves. They will try to talk it through. But what happens? They get punished for it. It leads to more pain. It leads to more hurt. And so the limbic brain goes, okay, that was the wrong solution. I need to now pull them in a different direction. So now they need to isolate. They need to lie. They need to fawn. They need to get angry and hurt others back. They need to suppress their needs, not talk about their needs. So the child does that. That seems to work. Then the brain goes, okay, that's the right way to go in life. Every time I feel in danger, I will now pull you to lie, manipulate, isolate, hurt, suppress your needs, fawn. That's the right way to go. Do you realize that gave instant safety and gratification. But 20, 30 years later, lying, not expressing your needs, fawning, manipulating, destroys relationships. The long-term consequences are going to be even more painful. But the limbic brain doesn't care about the long-term consequences. It cares about safety now. But what's happened in that brain is the limbic brain, not only is it in power for years and years and years, and the cortex doesn't develop, but secondly, the limbic brain becomes altered. Now it doesn't pull you in a healthy direction. It pulls you in a self-destructive, harmful direction. It pulls you towards those old survival patterns. And so the challenge for many people in recovery is they start to learn to live in their cortex. And more their cortex is the executive of their brain. And they get better and better at it, which is the goal of recovery. But once in a while, when they go through very intense emotions and their limbic brain gets triggered, it just moves into the driver's seat, kicks the cortex out, and says, we're going back to old patterns. And that becomes very challenging for people in recovery. So let me take this limbic brain a little bit farther. The next characteristic of complex trauma is that people continue to live typically instant gratification focus. They continue to live out of that limbic brain. And so what will make me feel good right now? I don't want to think long-term consequences. I just want to feel good now. So again, what I want you to see is when a child is in complex trauma and all of this danger, they're being abused, neglected, abandoned, most of their emotions are negative. They cannot resolve those emotions. They try to fix the things that are causing those negative emotions, but they can't. And so they got this snowballing, growing, painful emotions in their life. Their limbic brain not only wants to protect them, their limbic brain wants to have a little bit of positive feeling. Their limbic brain wants an escape from all that pain and get a little bit of pleasure now. And so the priority more and more in the limbic brain is when you get a chance to feel good, grab it. Because most of your life is going to be feeling bad. And their whole priority becomes instant gratification. With that comes the next one, and that is they are impulsive. So when an opportunity to feel good comes, grab it. Don't think about it. Act before you think. Because if you think about it too much, you might turn down the opportunity. So don't play the tape to the end. Grab what comes your way impulsively. So again, many people in recovery, as they begin to live out of their cortex, they begin to handle those impulses well. They don't give in to those impulses. They think them through. They think through the consequences, and they don't give in to those impulses. What they have to be aware of is when they get a really strong emotion, painful emotion. Then their impulsivity gets even worse. But they also have to be aware of when they get a really strong, good emotion. They feel on top of the world. They feel wonderful. Then they can get really impulsive too, because they're totally in their limbic brain. They're totally into instant gratification, the limbic brain's focus. So just be aware in recovery of very intense negative emotions, but also very intense positive emotions. The next thing that comes out of this limbic brain dilemma is that people from complex trauma tend to be great starters, poor finishers. So somebody has said the best people to hire for a job are people with complex trauma for the first couple of weeks. Because in the first couple of weeks, man, they are going to be on top of that job. They are going to be doing the very best job because that job is exciting. That job is giving them a rush. That job's got them back in their sympathetic nervous system. Then it's going to start to feel boring. Then it's going to start to be the same thing every day. is going to require consistency and discipline. There's going to be some parts of the job that they don't like. And there's going to be people that they work with that get on their nerves. And all of a sudden, they quit. They don't want to do this anymore. Sadly, so many people with complex trauma have started hundreds and thousands of projects. I've had some clients who've never finished one. They've never finished one thing in their life. And our LIFT program has been the very first thing that they've finished in their life. And that is because the limbic brain has so much power. And it basically says, unless I'm feeling good all the time, I don't want to do this anymore. And so I'm going to do something as long as it's exciting. As soon as it's not exciting, I'm done. And I'm quitting. The final characteristic comes out of complex trauma around the body, around the physical, is autoimmune system issues. So Dr. Gabramate and others have done tons of research on this. So let me go back to cortisol. So when you're in a traumatic situation, a dangerous situation, cortisol is released. You go to fight or flight, you get to safety. And so what they've seen happens at that point, once you're back to safety, if you look at an animal, it will shudder, it will shake, it will flex its muscles. And what it's doing is it's releasing the rest of the cortisol. And once that's released from the body, you can go back into your parasympathetic nervous system. The situation is resolved. You don't get traumatized. But what happens in complex trauma? You got cortisol pumping all the time. You can't resolve the situation. So the cortisol is never released from the body. It just builds up in the body. And so not only does it start to burn the corpus callosum in the brain, it starts to do other damage in the brain. It starts to affect your organs. It keeps you in your sympathetic nervous system all the time, so your parasympathetic can't heal. And that all of that affects your immune system. So it's quite interesting to me that what they're now seeing is that over 85% of Western illnesses are due to repressed cortisol in the body from a stress system that's been constantly activated. Autoimmune diseases. So if you look at chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, lupus, what they're beginning to see is a connection to repressed cortisol in the system from a constantly activated stress system. They're beginning to see connections with repressed cortisol, ongoing activated stress system to cancer, to diabetes, to heart issues. So many health issues come out of trauma. And it's now considered to be one of the greatest costs in our healthcare system. So that's just how trauma affects the body. 21 different ways. I hope that just helps you. Again, some of you are going to go, wow, I got all of those. This feels very overwhelming. I'm more screwed up than I thought. What I want you to know is there's hope. I'm pointing all of these things out to you so that you can begin to realize I can heal from this. I can change this. This does not have to be my narrative forever. I wasn't the start of the problems. I wasn't the cause of the problems, but I'm the only one that can now solve the problems and change the problems. Well, thank you again for being with us.